So as you know, I come from practice. I used to be a manager. And somehow I developed my own little theory of organizations as I went through my Ph.D. studies and my early works as a professor. And I tend to see organizations as in a very simple way as human collectives engaged in providing solutions to some problem they identify. And to me, that's the core of what organizations are. And to achieve that goal, organizations need resources. Okay, so it's a story about resources, about what you want to achieve, and how do you get resources? You have to convince those who actually own the resources or control them to give you those resources. So you have to go through these evaluation processes. Okay, so that's how I came into the topic of social evaluation. I think it's key. If you want to understand organizations, you have to understand these processes of evaluations through which organizations actually get stakeholders on board and are able to secure the resources they need to operate and compete and eventually survive. Well, one of our arguments is that in a way no one can escape the identity penalty if you deviate from the idealized template of what a scientist should be. So maybe because you have a high status, maybe you can gain some form of tolerance. I believe that Phillips and Zuckerman use the word immunity. So maybe some level of immunity, but whether you're high status or not, you're still expected to conform to an identity template. So I know, let's say you are a 3-star Michelin chef, and imagine that you receive a lot of awards given by the food processing industry. How would that affect your evaluation? So we believe, that's one of the arguments of the paper, that if you have a few of those, that's fine, because as a chef it's okay to work with the food processing industry. But if you have a lot of those awards, which are what we call exogenous indices, so that is evaluations that have been made by an external audience, that might actually indicate that you're deviating from the expected template that peer evaluators have in mind about what a chef should be. Okay, and in academia there are a few cases of high status professors who, I think we were giving an example in the paper, who have been strongly criticized for engaging with industry too much as well. So being high status may help to some instance, but still it does not shield you completely from the identity conformance requirement that we are pinpointing in the paper. Touchy question. One of the key features of scandals is that they contaminate. So they tend to spread, and they spread at least in two ways. They spread through network ties. So if you're affiliated with somebody who's implicated in a scandal, you might as well suffer negative consequences. And it can also spread through categorical similarity. So or membership, if you belong to the same category. So I think the first order of business when there is a scandal is to dissociate yourself as much as possible from the incriminated actor or organization. So that's really the first thing you need to do. I know if there's a scandal if Volkswagen is accused of cheating emission tests, and you're a diesel manufacturer, then you need to do whatever you can to emphasize that you're not like Volkswagen because they're German and you're Italian, or because whatever you might think of. So I think that's the first order of business, and it's based on kind of most of the main arguments in the literature on scandals. So what we actually try to advance in this paper is that maybe the contamination effect is not all. And you also need to take into consideration that when firm is involved in a scandal, it's considerably weakened. And that opens opportunities for competitors. So it's a very simple idea that, so Volkswagen is hit by a scandal. It loses 30% market share in the US in a couple of months. And then you see that Fiat and Volvo, two European manufacturers, are actually having record sales at the same time because of substitution. So, consumers actually staying away from Volkswagen, and they still need a car, so they will buy from a competitor. So I think it would be naive if a scandal strikes one of your competitors not to use that to your advantage. Of course, you have to be careful not to be contaminated, but of course it seems like a reasonable strategy to bet on that. And the third thing that the second thing that we are actually looking at in this paper is the argument that we are advancing is that if you are perceived as enforcing stricter norms of behavior, the substitution effect is actually larger, so you might benefit more from the scandal. But that obviously is not something that you build overnight. So in a way, it's an incentive. If this is true, this is an incentive for firms to behave in a morally responsible manner. Because whenever there will be a scandal, then kind of protects your reputation for being a good citizen, if I may employ this term, might protect you from the fallouts of the scandal. So I was working for one of the largest movie studios in the world. So I was working for the local branch, of course. And I was very surprised because it's definitely one of the largest, but also one of the most artistically oriented Hollywood studios. And yet, in the French context, it was regarded as a low status actor. Okay, so you might even say that it is still stigmatized in some way because it's a Hollywood studio, and to understand that you have to go back in time and replay the story of the industry. So 1895, the year the cinematograph is invented by the Lumière brothers. So that's actually the start of the film industry as we know it, as a commercial activity. By 1914, between 80 and 90% of the world market is dominated by French companies. But that's a peak, and then comes World War I. Then comes the creation of the Edison's Trust in the US, which kind of evicts all the competitors. So there is this golden age of the French companies being dominating the film, the business of film in the world. And after World War II, when the Bloom-Burn Agreement is signed, which is part of the Marshall Plan, it opens all French theaters to Hollywood productions, and all the industry has been structured around this strong belief that the Americans are coming and we need to keep them away. Okay, so same year the Centre National de la Cinématographie, the French Film Board, is created as a way to support French companies. Okay, so you can't understand the film industry in France if you don't look at this history, and you can't understand the stigma that was associated with American film companies in France, if you don't understand that the full industry has been organized around this real or perceived threat of a foreign invasion. Okay, so there is this stigma, and maybe the company actually, and also others, engage in different strategies. So they try to show that they were actually respectful of the ethos of French cinema, that they were respecting the authors, that they were respecting the specific tradition of French filmmaking. I think first you have to recognize that these are collective projects, right? It's and all the 4 papers you mentioned are actually with co-authors. So I would I wouldn't take credit for any of those. I mean, it's really a collective achievement, and I would definitely not have managed to do this on my own. So I think that's also, you know, what publication and research is. You have to work collectively. So it's an organization in a way. To me, one of the keys is it has to be interesting. To me, I mean, it's a very difficult task to do research. So if you don't have some level of intrinsic motivation, I don't think you can actually succeed in reaching the end of the process. So what kept me going is for all these years, and I mean. So you see, you know, papers being published now, but of course these are projects that have been started years ago. The AJS paper it's been in the making for, I don't know, 5-6 years, maybe more than that. So how do you keep, you know, fighting for all these 3 years? Is because you find it interesting and you have intrinsic motivation to actually to go further. You don't do that because you want to earn points or because there's a bonus attached to it or whatever. You need to find, you know, your own little engine that makes you work on it. And of course, I mean, there's a lot of hard work behind that. You know, individual work, but also collective work, definitely. And again, I mean, time is very important. It takes time to do research. It takes time to address the reviewers' comments. I don't know. I guess it's a long process. You have to stay humble. So I tend to think my own rule is that the reviewer is always right, even when she or is wrong. I think he or she is right, and if she's wrong, it's because I've not explained myself sufficiently in a sufficiently clear manner. So that requires humility, that requires time, that requires effort and work, and that requires you know, a good team to keep the energy and to maintain the level of stamina that is required to achieve the task.